Robertson. I'm a technology reporter here with Bloomberg News in Washington, D.C. Greetings to everyone joining us on Facebook Live and YouTube. We're really excited about these shows that we're doing. We're focused on consumer security, and I'm here today to talk to you about a really large data breach that Dropbox, the popular cloud service, announced last week. It has some really important implications for consumers, and there's some really interesting issues to dig into surrounding when companies disclose breaches and why some companies, such as Dropbox, disclose a breach years ago and see that breach grow kind of exponentially years later when hackers release more data. So we're going to be taking questions as well. So anybody on Facebook, on YouTube, please feel free to shoot in some questions, and I'll be able to answer you here, and we really look forward to engaging with anybody with questions about hacking and online security, and things like that. So first, let me catch everybody up. So last week, Dropbox confirmed what what Vice News's Motherboard website had been reporting. They've been doing some great cybersecurity reporting. And what Dropbox confirmed was that a data breach that they had disclosed in 2012 was significantly larger than they previously knew or revealed. And the orders of magnitude we're talking about here is we're talking about a data breach potentially as large as 69 million people. That's a really large piece of Dropbox's overall audience. And the reason this is significant is because not only do a lot of us have Dropbox accounts, and there's some very basic things that we as consumers can do to protect ourselves against identity theft and account hacking and things like that. But there's also a really interesting story here about why Dropbox disclosed a breach in 2012, reset a bunch of people's passwords, and then saw that number jump, by a huge degree 4 years later. So I want to walk, all viewers through those types of issues. So this is a story we're talking about. August 31st, Dropbox confirms 2012 breach bigger than previously known. And what happened here, as I mentioned, Vice News's website, Motherboard, was reporting that a hacker was disclosing a really large number of Dropbox accounts online. And that number turned out to be 69 million. Now, we hear hackers claim a lot of things all the time online, and a lot of it is not true. And they claim large breaches that aren't true, and it's very hard to tell, what data is really valid online, and especially when a criminal hacker is claiming that is true. This is a real thing. So Dropbox was actually hacked in 2012, and the hackers got a really large number of usernames and passwords for their account. And what's so significant about this is, if you're a user of Dropbox and you were part of that 69 million, you wouldn't have gotten any notice about this until last week, when Dropbox reset everybody's passwords who they knew were compromised. This raises the question, the really kind of fundamental question we're here today to explore, which is, Dropbox knew about this breach in 2012. They knew it was a big breach. Why didn't they just change everybody's passwords? Some companies have done that. Evernote and others who have had data breaches have said, you know what, we're compromised. We may not know the full extent of this, but we're going to change everybody's password. Everybody's going to be secured at the same time, even if we don't have evidence that this individual may have been targeted. Dropbox didn't do that, and they're not alone. LinkedIn had the same problem as well. They had a data breach of some 6 million accounts a few years back. They changed those people's passwords. They learned about it because a hacker was selling that information online, and they were able to confirm the breach that way. A couple years later, it turns out that the breach was much bigger than they previously knew, potentially as large as 117 million LinkedIn accounts. So we're seeing this pattern of large cloud computing companies disclosing breaches that are relatively small, based on what criminals disclose on the black market, and then seeing those breaches kind of multiply in size later. And for consumers, there are some really basic things that you can do. And I'm going to walk you through one example of how we know that the Dropbox breach is legitimate, and how that plays into what we as consumers can do. So I'm going to bring up a screen here. This is a technical screenshot. What you're seeing here is this is a string of numbers. That's called a hash. That's just a computer. It's a computer-generated series of numbers and letters and symbols that it doesn't mean anything to the naked eye, but it means something to computers. What you're seeing here in the red, that is this number translated into this particular user's password. Now, I got this image from a really great cybersecurity expert named Troy Hunt. He runs a website called Have I Been Pwned, P-W-N-E-D, and this is a site for regular people to log in and see if their usernames and passwords have been breached in some of these data hacks. And what you're seeing here is this is the data that leaked. The hashed value, that's what leaked. It doesn't make any sense to the ordinary person, but what this shows is that through a very simple open source free software program, hackers, or in this case Troy, the cybersecurity researcher, is able to translate that number into his or his wife's real password. And the significance of this is you look at both figures, and the password is really, really hard to digest. I mean, it's just a string of numbers and letters itself. And that's really important because we've talked as cybersecurity professionals and reporters for a long time about the significance of having a strong password. Well, you don't want to remember something like what we just showed you on the screen. It is just a jumble of letters and numbers. And one of the ways that you can generate really strong passwords is through a password manager, such as this. This is a screenshot from a program that Troy Hunt recommends called 1Password. And what it does is, this is just a sample, but you're able to upload all of your information about your accounts into one place, into one app. And what this program does two things. It generates a really strong, unique password that exists nowhere else for you, and it automatically logs into these sites. It also does a really interesting thing called two-factor authentication, which is it generates a one-time password. So this screen is showing how, if you were using Dropbox, you can add what's called a one-time password. And all that means is that the application syncs to Dropbox's computers, and it generates a one-time password every 30 seconds, every 60 seconds, something like that. And you open the app, you get your one-time password, and you log in. So that's really important. Like, it's not really significant which program you use, but password managers like these will allow you to generate a really, really strong password, will allow you to do this kind of two-step authentication all in one place. And the significance of that is, if there's another breach like Dropbox, if your password gets out, you saw what that password looks like. It's nothing. Like, you're not going to reuse that password anywhere else. So if you've reused passwords across websites, which a lot of us do, using a password manager like this will allow you to get away from that. Use a totally different password for every site, and you don't have to remember any of them at all. We're getting a question from Facebook. Thank you for everybody writing in. I want to answer some of these. Facebook user wants to know, what kind of stuff should you not share via Dropbox? Another wants to know, which service or company do you think is best at cybersecurity and why? I'll take the first one first. What type of information you shouldn't share via Dropbox? Well, it's a tricky question. I mean, obviously, with cybersecurity and the level of hacking being what it is, we're seeing bigger and bigger breaches all the time. You probably wouldn't want to share anything online that you wouldn't want to see come back to you in an embarrassing way. I mean, if they are, pictures, like racy pictures or things like that, like, you don't want anybody but yourself to own that content. You don't want Google to have it. You don't want Dropbox to have it. Anything that's really deeply personal, whether it's photos, family photos, things of a very sensitive nature, you want to keep those to yourself. Corporate data as well. I mean, if you put your company's data on your personal Dropbox account, and that Dropbox account gets hacked, you put your company at big risk, and that obviously puts you at a professional risk as well. So I would say corporate data, keep it off the cloud services, and sensitive things like photos and documents that you are better stored kind of locally on your home hard drive or a flash drive, keep those things off the internet, just because hacks like these happen and nobody's perfect at security. Even cybersecurity professionals aren't perfect at security. Second question I want to address is the one about which service or company do we think is best at cybersecurity and why? It's a difficult question to answer, but I'll answer it via analogy. Some prominent cybersecurity researchers have said lately that they've basically advised companies, if you're a small company or you're a company that doesn't have a lot of resources, what should you do in terms of buying equipment to help the cybersecurity of your network? And these cybersecurity professionals will say, buy Google Chromebooks. Like, Google collects a lot of data. There are a lot of privacy folks who are, are very wary and skeptical of Google for good reason. However, when it comes to security, Google is very, very aggressive at protecting users' accounts. And if you're a company that doesn't, or a company or an individual that doesn't have the resources to do what some of these cybersecurity professionals do on a day-to-day basis to protect their accounts, using Google accounts or using Google hardware, in the case of Chromebooks, it's not a bad way to go. There's a lot built in to those systems that are just kind of, have security baked in. Of course, Apple as well. Apple is doing end-to-end encryption, and this is the reason that Apple got in the big fight with the FBI over the San Bernardino terrorist's cell phone. Apple's doing end-to-end encryption on a lot of services, iMessage, FaceTime. These are services that are so easy to use, and you, as a user, you don't even know it's being encrypted end-to-end, which means a hacker would have to go through a lot of work to get inside those communications. They'd have to be on your device or on Apple's computer. And those are very hard things to do. Not impossible, but using services like that, Google Chromebooks, Google Gmail, Apple services as well. And I and a lot of other reporters are big fans of services like Signal. Signal is a really robust mobile application where you can do encrypted chat. It's incorporated into WhatsApp now, so Facebook's WhatsApp application also uses the Signal protocol underneath it. So you can be guaranteed a pretty high level of security. They're not perfect. None of these methods are perfect.